Continuing on with Maya, we're going to take a look at an example of how to make something a little more fancy. This is the Imperial Shuttle Tiderium from Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, if I'm not mistaken. Also, I believe in the Return of the Jedi. And you can see this is a nice chunky kind of spaceship shape. We're going to use this more as sort of a reference, not try to model it exactly, but just give a general sort of idea of how to make a model of this. So switching over to Maya, again, what we'll do is we'll start out with a cube. And I'm going to start off by hitting R, stretching it out along the Z-axis. Now this is actually important going along the Z-axis. If you're going to mirror this one, make sure it's along the Z-axis. So stretching it along the blue, that's its long axis. And we'll make just sort of a basic shape here. So first thing I'd like to do is make it a beveled shape. And beveling is always a nice little function that takes a basic shape, kind of rounds it off a little bit. So for that function, I'm going to go to Edit Mesh and choose Bevel. And you can see what it does right away is it cuts the edges off at a 45-degree angle. It does that all the way around every single edge. Here's the options for beveling. So you could change some of these options if you wanted to play around with that bevel. I'm just going to accept the default right now and move on from there. So that's a bevel function. And beveling always looks good, especially on ships and spaceships. All of these objects have bevels pretty much. They're not straight polygons. They all have fairly beveled edges, inset and outset. Just gives it a little bit more character. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a function called an extrusion. So I'm going to take these faces and pull them out. If you've experienced Rhino, we've done some extrusions. But before we do an extrusion, first of all, I'm going to switch to face mode because I want to work on the faces now. We're going to take these faces, we're going to pull them out and stretch them out and work from there. So again, up to Edit Mesh. I'm going to go to Extrude. Before I do that, what I'd like to do is change the extrusion settings. I'm going to click on this little box right here. And the first thing I usually like to do whenever I start a tool, especially on a new project, is under the Edit menu, reset your settings. Nothing changed, so everything was fine from before, but that's just a useful thing to do because Maya will save your settings from the previous project. So if you've made some modifications to these and you don't want those modifications to happen because they were specific to a project, you might want to do that reset. I'm going to change the thickness to about 0.1. I'm going to hit Apply. Okay, so now that has fixed that into that option. And I'm going to close that box. Now, what an extrude does, I'm going to select that face. I have 3 ways, actually 4 ways I can do an extrude. I can go up to Edit Mesh and hit Extrude. I can go to the menu bar and also extrude. I can also do the function Control E. And the other thing I can do is go Shift and right click and extrude face. So that's 4 different ways I can actually do that function. So there is my face that I have just extruded. And you can see it popped out a little chunk right there. Now, I also seem to see a collection of my tools here. Well, now what I can do is I can operate on that face. The first thing I'd like to do is I'm going to move that out and also move it down. So you can see I'm making that kind of snoot, droop snoot, as it's called. And what I'd also like to do is I would like to scale it so it is thinner and narrower. Now, right now, the extrusion tool function I have is using the move key. If I would like to do a scale, I can click on one of these cubes here, and now I'm using a scale tool. So I have switched to the scale tool. So this is kind of like a little multi-tool here. And if I want to go back and move it, I can click on that, drag that down a bit. Maybe drag that out a little bit more. Okay, so there is kind of the little droop snoot of the shuttle. Now, when I click away and I lose my tool, I can't go back to that. I will have to go and settle for the individual tools here. It'd be nice to have that multi-tool as a function. I've got to figure out how to do that one. Okay, so there's our kind of droop snoot there. So the next thing I'd like to do is go out and start adding in some wing pods. I'm going to add in some engine pods on the side here. Now I know that that doesn't actually happen on the Tidarium, but these will look kind of cool. So I'm going to start extruding this face out. So there's my face, and I'm going to again shift right click, extrude face. There's my tool, drag that out there. Click on the scale tool, and I'm going to scale that up a bit. Now, slight problem, and that is this. I've worked on one side, and I would like to do the same thing to the other side. Now, it is possible that I could mirror that a little bit later after I have finished one entire wing. It would be kind of nice to be able to do everything all at once. So I'm just going to go back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up here for my symmetry. And right now my symmetry is off. I'm going to choose the World X symmetry. And I get a little pop-up here saying Symmetry World X. What that means is my symmetry is going to happen along the x-axis. So whatever I do on one side, so notice if I select this face right here, spin it around, notice the face on the opposite side is selected as well. So whatever I do to this face, it will happen to that face. Now it's possible to lose that symmetry function, which is a bit of a pain. You might have to back up a few steps. I'm not entirely too sure how that happens. Hasn't happened to me yet, but not bragging, I'm just saying. So what I'm going to do is, again, shift, right click, extrude face, drag that out. And I'm going to now, I lost my little tool there, I'm going to scale that up. Okay. And I'm going to shift, right click, extrude that out. And one more time. Maybe I'll go to the wireframe mode here. Oh, I'm not seeing that multi-tool. Interesting. Whoops. Okay, did not want to hit that. This is actually a smooth preview. And it looks, you can see how it smoothed everything out. That was pressing 3. Now, to go back, I'm going to press 1. And that was where I wanted to be. Okay, so I'm going to scale this down. And make it a little narrower while I'm at it. Okay. So the reason I wanted to do that was because I'd like to make some engine pods here. So this will be the intake for the engines. Now I know that's not on the Tidarium, but that's okay. So I'm going to extrude that out. There we go. Extrude that face out. I'm going to scale that back a little bit. And I'm going to do a couple of extrudes here. And scale down a bit. Whoops, that was a move. I wanted to scale. So you can see I'm kind of making a little inset and a frame here. And bring that up a bit so you can see what it is I'm doing here. Okay, so right about now, what I'm going to do here with this is I'm going to take this face and push it inwards. So now you see why I was doing that. What that now does is it gives me that kind of inset, that rocket motor or rocket intake look, which is kind of neat. And this looks even more interesting when I do a smooth preview. So pressing 3, you can now see those look like actual kind of engines. So the smooth actually smooths out all of the hard edges. And that's an option for later. So, okay, so I've got that setting right here. I'm going to go back to my faces, and now I'll make the wings. Pull that out. And move it back a bit. So now I can start actually shifting it back a bit. And the other thing is if I do a rotate on this, rotate my face a bit, the next extrusion that comes out will come out parallel to that face. So now notice that my wings are starting to point downwards. And again, the other thing I can do is instead of rotating a face, I can switch to edge mode. And if I move my edge, that's the same as rotating a face. But I've also actually, you can see I've made the front of this more of a trapezoid kind of shape. So lots of things and ways you can work on this. Another thing I like to do once I've switched into edge mode with this is I can take these edges, drag them back. So now you can see I'm making kind of more of a swept wing. Maybe I want a narrower wing. I can want my wings to narrow. So you can see how I can change all the shapes of this. So we can start playing around with the way that works. And switch back to face mode. Extrude that down a bit. Maybe one more. And again, just playing around with some of the details here. So now I sort of notice, well, okay, maybe I'd like my inside to be a little bit heavier. So let's maybe move the bottom part down, give it a little more depth there. And like I said, it's just now I'm kind of freeform sculpting here. So you can see now moving the edges around, as long as I'm kind of being symmetrical, then it's looking pretty good. So that's just using the extrude tool, extruding the face out. And once I've extruded the face out, I can pull it out to make my polygons bigger. I can rotate the face. I can switch to edge mode. I can change my edges. If I want even finer detail, maybe switch to vertex mode. Grab a vertex. Maybe I want something to kind of angle out there, make it a little bit more of an edge. You know, again, it's kind of more, what does this look like? Now I've completely gone away from my original intention of making something that looked like the shuttle, but like I said, it's more kind of a guideline than anything else. Now, I'd like to make that vertical fin up the back, and you can see there, right there. This has folding wings. Mine doesn't, of course. But I'll show you an example just really, really quickly, quick and dirty, sort of how to make that vertical fin. Now, you notice that I only have the one big surface here, and I would like to divide that up and get some more objects. So I'm going to switch back to object mode. Actually, sorry, I want to go to face mode right here. So here's the face I have right here. Now, I'd like to get some more polygons, but just on this face. I don't want to have to deal with the extrusion. So I'm going to go up to Edit Mesh and Add Divisions. I've got to select the face first. Edit Mesh, Add Divisions. Okay, so now you can see I've got some divisions added. And if I increase this number, well, we can work with that. I can just continue on into my, you can see I can add more divisions there. So what I can do now is I can start taking, I'm going to undo that bit right there. So I can take that face and I can extrude that out. And now let's switch to edge mode. I can drag that down, start making that kind of fin shape. Can get kind of carried away with this. Now I would like that to be a little narrower. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm still in edge mode, if I double click on this edge, you can see that it selects kind of an edge ring along here. And let's go to scale. Let's see if that scales in for me. Okay. Might have to go to vertices. Drag a window around these vertices. There we go. Interesting, my pivot is not centering there. Possibly has to do with the symmetry. Sometimes the tools work differently when you have symmetry. So let's try this. Let me just select just these objects. Yes, because I'm actually working with the symmetry turned on, so that's what the effect that I wanted. But the symmetry was causing me some troubles. So sometimes it's a case of when something is not behaving the way it's supposed to, just start playing around and seeing, oh, right, this tool is affecting what I'm doing. So because I had the symmetry turned on, I really only had to work on one side as opposed to trying to work on both sides. Okay, so you get the idea. This is where this is all going here. This is something I want to be careful of. Notice that I've got these black surfaces that I just created here. That's because I've turned this inside out. I have actually pushed my surface into and beyond the other surface, so I have turned it inside out, and I don't want to do that. That's actually a bad thing to do. And again, I'm just kind of fooling around here with this at this point. But you can see we can get kind of a nice kind of a shape there. Maybe not perfectly aerodynamic, but you get the idea of kind of where we can go with this and how you can change the object up and change the shape, make everything look a little differently. One last little thing here is I'm going to, I'll show you another little trick with the extrude. So I'm going to switch back to face mode. And I'm going to extrude this face. And it extrudes outwards. Now, what I'd like to do is I would like to scale this so it is smaller. And using my scale tool, now my scale tool, remember, brings everything in towards the center. So if it's on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, it is moved towards the center. So that works nicely along this axis. But if I try and scale something in the z-axis, notice how what it's doing is it's bringing this top edge towards the center and moving the bottom edge towards the center, but it's also in the rotating this plane around, and that's not what I want. I just want to make this plane smaller. So what I need to do is reset my pivot point. And to reset my pivot point, I've got my tool selected here. I'm going to hold down D and look for where it says Align. And when I click on Align, notice that the pivot point rotates. So now it is parallel, or this axis is parallel to the surface. This axis and this axis are parallel to the surface. So now when I use my scale tool, all my actions are parallel to the surface or the face as opposed to the actual world. So that's rotating your pivot point around. And the same thing with the move tool. The move tool will move it in and out parallel to the surface. Okay. Now I could have put in a lot more detail on this, but I didn't want to have that drag on and on and on. So last thing you can do, of course, is with any face, you can assign a new material to it. And of course, you can give it a color. Well, that's actually, I've colored the entire object. I should just be able to select a face. Okay. Not too sure where that one went. Anyways. So of course, if I want to smooth everything out, I can go to Mesh and Smooth. Actually, I have to be in Object mode. And then hit Mesh. And Smooth. And you can see now I've got an almost completely different ship there.